What is going on, guys? It is Dave Haas here with the Rise Up Rich podcast, and I have a very special guest today, a good friend of mine, Julie Morden, who is a grade 5 teacher. She's also a mother of 3, and we're going to tackle a topic that is really near and dear to my heart because I just became a father, and we're going to talk about parenting. I think this is going to be a super beneficial podcast for any parents out there or any soon-to-be parents, because it's a lot of what I teach in Rise Up Rich. It can be applied to parenting, and Julie has like some amazing insight. One, just being a mother of 3, and 2, being a teacher and being exposed to so many kids. But before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so now. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on Instagram. The whole goal of creating Rise Up Rich is to help spread awareness and help people live a better life, help people experience the happiness and the joy that I experience every day. And if you get anything from this podcast or any other podcast, please share it because it is in giving that we receive. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce Julie. So Julie, thanks for coming on the podcast and just kind of talk about what kind of inspired you. You know, we started talking over Instagram there and talking about parenting, and what kind of inspired you to kind of come on and share what it is that you have to share.
Well, my husband and I have been into personal growth and just pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones, and we've been pushing ourselves to share what we know. So for instance, 2 years ago, I was invited to St. Clair College to guest speak about what I do in my classroom and why everything runs so well. And my first instinct was like, oh no. And my husband's like, we're just talked about personal growth and you're not going to step outside of your comfort zone. So then when this opportunity came, my husband's like, no, people are always coming to you asking advice. Like, why not put it out there?
Yeah, definitely. And we're so reserved on sharing what it is, especially when it is outside of our comfort zone. So I just applaud you for coming here, because I think this is such an important topic, because there's all this stigma around millennials and entitlement and all these things, but everyone's quick to judge, but no one's really putting out the information that we need to put into place when we're raising our children to help create better humans for this world. And you've had a lot of success with your own kids and in your classroom, right? Obviously, if St. Clair's inviting you to speak. So let's just dig right into it here. And what do you think the number one issue is that you're observing in your classroom, with your students right now? What's the number one issue that is facing our children?
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about entitlement. We all get judged as parents, and I'm guilty of it as well. I learned through my own mistakes with my kids, and we all do that. But the point is that when you make a mistake, that you take that next step. So I see a lot of students in my classroom who are scared to even make the first step. They're so afraid of failing that it leads to different behaviors that you don't really realize are symptoms of a cause. And then when we talk about, entitlement, and I just kept thinking, why did we raise kids who are entitled? I don't understand the why part. And it took a little bit, and actually it was looking at one of your podcasts. I was kind of going through it a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, oh my goodness, our fear of failure as adults has gotten so big that we now fear failure for our children's sake. And if our kids fail, we think that we failed. So it's like this snowball effect that has no end.
Yeah, that is so true, because like we were just talking before we got started on the podcast here, it's all of my coaching clients, all in some way, shape, or form, have this innate fear of failure and this needing for acceptance. So really digging into why we fear failure so much and why we need the acceptance of others so much. And it's not just this day and age. I think it might be a little bit amplified in this day and age, but because of Instagram and Facebook and these kinds of things. But I think it's always been there. We've always wanted to fit in. And when you fail, you feel like you're not fitting in, right? So I think underneath fear of failure is some fear of acceptance as well, because there's such a pressure to conform and be accepted by other people.
Absolutely. And I see it in my classroom all the time. And so one of the biggest things I try and do in my classroom is just say, well, a grade is just letting you know what you know. It's not a failure. When you don't have an answer to a question, that's not a failure. Ask a friend to come to the blackboard and help you out. To just teach them different strategies to say, okay, it just lets me know what I don't know.
Right. And I think something that you touched upon there is I think just embracing failure. I think that's one thing that I'm going to teach my daughter for sure, is that, failure is just part of the process, and it's not this, be all end all if you fail. It's like I look at my failures now as like my greatest gifts. And I almost at a point in my life where I welcome failure because I know that it's going to turn into this huge learning opportunity for me. So are you doing anything in your classroom to teach your students and how to like kind of like embrace failure or not be so scared of failure, and even with your own kids?
Absolutely. One of the things I talk about regularly is, you and Tony had talked about resilience, and, it's missing, and our school talks about it all the time. Well, you can't be resilient if you've never failed. You've had nothing to overcome yet. So when we protect our kids about failing, then you haven't given them the opportunity to be resilient. You need to develop those skills. So in my classroom, when kids come to me with a failure, whether it be social or whatever it is, sometimes it's a conflict between friends. I made a change 3 years ago that has been almost overwhelming to witness. Instead of intervening like we normally would, I just started asking kids, well, are you asking me to intervene and fix this for you? Or are you asking for advice so you can fix this for yourself? And shockingly, just about every single time, the kids are like, you know what? No, I would rather fix this for myself. Like, I am capable, I am responsible. But they needed to be given the opportunity because we tend to just jump in and save them all the time.
Yeah. And that's like kind of like the mentality of, I think, our generation, our parents growing up. And before we were getting into this, I was talking about like, if I wouldn't have went down this spiritual path and did all this spiritual development that I did and had all these realizations and awakenings that I had, I know 100% I would have raised an entitled child because as a child, I wasn't given anything. As you know, my mom died when I was 9 years old, and my dad was kind of left to kind of take over, and he just wasn't doing a really great job. So I had my first job when I was 11 years old. I was working Funk's corn detasseling. It was a terrible job. Don't ever let your kid corn detassel, but maybe you should after I finish this point. But then right from there, I was working at Silver Tee Golf driving range, picking up golf balls. I was riding my bike like 8 miles to get to that job. And I just remember saying as a young adult, even in like 25, that when I have kids, I'm never going to make them work this hard. But then because of this path that I've gone down, I came to this realization that not being given anything in my youth was actually the greatest gift that I could have ever been given, because it instilled this work ethic in me. It showed me what I needed to do to succeed. It put me into a place to help develop resilience because, working in all these different jobs, and I experienced failures. I was, when you're working for an employer, if you're not doing something right, it's not like in school where you're going to get like an 8th place trophy or something along those lines. They're going to tell you like, hey, you better pick it up. I remember actually Funk's corn detasseling, they had a 3-strike policy. And if you missed a certain amount of tassels, they would come. And it was actually a terribly embarrassing thing, but the guy would follow you down your row, and he would pick all of the tassels that you missed, and he would have them in a big bundle, and he would come out at the end of the bundle right in front of the whole crew, and he would say, Dave Haas, strike number 1, and he'd throw all the tassels on the ground. So, you want to talk about failure. I was put into the place where I had to develop that resilience. And, I'm just so happy that I was able to experience that. But in the time, I couldn't see it. But now I think by us even just sitting here and having this conversation, we're bringing more awareness to the fact that it's okay to give our kids a work ethic. It's okay to allow our kids to try and not succeed. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And when you fail and you overcome it, whether it's changing course or changing strategies, you end up with this sense of pride, right? And that's because during those hard times, we develop internal motivation, right? So instead of focusing on that end goal and just focusing on the destination, you're learning from your journey and you're gathering things away. So for instance, like one change I made at home, because I'm always looking for new information, whether it be parenting or schooling, was I changed my language when it comes time to talking about pride. So instead of always telling my son, oh, I'm proud of you, which turns into, Mom, are you proud of me? Mom, are you proud of me? I started saying, wow, you should be proud of yourself. And identifying moments whether it be because of values they demonstrated or character traits that you think are very important in life, giving them the internal dialogue to seek their own approval as opposed to others goes a really, really long way in just how they stay motivated.
Yeah, I freaking love that. I think that's so amazing. Of like, because another thing that I find that so many of my coaching clients are suffering from is this this feeling of unworthiness, or this feeling of not good enough. And I think a lot of that probably stems from this reward system that we were once given. It's like seeking the approval of the parents, seeking the approval of the teacher, seeking the approval of your peers. And that seeking behavior leads into the only way you feel good about yourself is when you're getting that like on Facebook, or when you're getting that comment, or when your friends are talking about you and you're getting that approval. But ultimately what you need to be doing is you need to, like you articulated so beautifully, was that you need to be looking for that approval for yourself, right? So it's like, that's a huge shift, I think, that needs to happen for everyone that's parenting right now. It's about teaching them how to find those internal rewards.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's just move on, because we talked a little bit about like entitlement, and we talked about like what created this like entitled kind of millennial, because this is what everyone talks about when they talk about millennials, is entitlement. And for me, like I explained, that entitlement for me was that I could see where it could happen, was that if I didn't have this spiritual path, I would have wanted to give my child everything, because I didn't want to work as hard as, I didn't want my child to work as hard as I had to work. And that's kind of like where, the whole entitlement movement came, because all these hardworking people were like, I just want to give my kids, I don't want them to experience this. But the one major realization that I had, because I've seen it in so many of my clients, and I've seen it and just observed it, is that the more you give your kids, the more entitled they're going to feel, right? So we talked a little bit about teaching your kids like gratitude for what they already have. So maybe just like kind of expand on that, the gratitude thing, and how your kids are learning, I guess, that work ethic, or moving away from that entitlement kind of mentality.
So as a teacher, I get a lot of parents who are like grades, 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 right? And so they're focused on this end destination, as opposed to being grateful and appreciating what they've learned in the process, right? So a lot of kids end up focusing on the trophy and the medals and the rewards, and they're completely missing the journey. So what happens is, as teachers, if you're quiet in the library, I'll give you a reward. But then when you ask the kids, oh, why do you need to be quiet in the library? They're like, well, so I can get a reward. Yeah. But they've completely missed that journey aspect, and doesn't allow them to understand and be grateful in the long run for the little things like, oh, I should be quiet in the library, so because I'm being respectful to those who are concentrating on other things, So then all of a sudden it's they've completely jumped to the end, as opposed to enjoying that process. But now if they have that, and they've learned like, well, it was the effort it took to get to the grade, and it was this and that, those things can be repeated. I can't repeat an A+ on the same test I've already done. But when we're valuing the journey and the effort, they end up being appreciative of their hard work and whatever it took for them to get there. And that's something that can be repeated no matter the subject, no matter the environment, no matter where they go. And as a result, they're appreciative and much more grateful for the energy that they've put into something, as opposed to just the result.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, learning to love the process is like, one of the primary, critical factors in Rise Up Rich teaching, is that so many of us, and it's because of these reward systems that were put into place, so many of us are focused on the destination. And when your mind is constantly living in the future, that's what creates all this anxiety and all this stress. And you see how anxiety is just sweeping across like all of the young people right now. Is like people are anxious about everything, and all anxiety lives in the future. And a good way to overcome anxiety is just to figure out how to be in the present moment. But if you're so focused on the end goal, then you're only living in the future. So that creates this lack of patience. It creates stress about trying to get to the goal, but everyone is forgetting about actually just loving the process. And it's like, in the journey of life, I like the sailing reference. It's like there's gonna be rough waters and there's gonna be calm waters, and it's not about just enjoying the calm waters. It's about enjoying the whole entire experience. And also in sailing is all about the journey, and it's not about the destination. Powerboating is about the journey. It's like get in the boat, smash the throttle down, let's get to where we're going. Sailing's about enjoying that ride on the way there. And I think changing that, changing that teaching from this is not all about the end. It's like enjoy the process. For sure.
Yeah, and it's normalizing failure. It's making failure okay. Like the students in my classroom who normally wouldn't try are always happy to try because they go up to the blackboard and know, well, if I don't know or if I fail, they're allowed to just invite a friend to help them out. They're allowed to just say, hey, can someone give me a hand here? And now they're learning it. Yeah. That's the goal. It's not putting them on the spot to know exactly each answer.
And the other thing that I love is about bringing a friend up to help them, because in life we get so focused on like, I'm Dave and you're Julie, and that is like a dualistic point of view of the world. But when really we're all interconnected, and learning to reach out for help from friends, family, anybody, and just being like just having the willingness to say, I need help with this. That willingness in itself is going to begin to bring more help into your life. So by doing that in the classroom, it's just showing your students that, hey, it's okay to ask for help, right? And also they're learning that when they do ask for help, they get a better understanding because they're hearing like a different perspective. Like you might teach it one way, but their friend might show them how to do it in a way that they can understand better, right? So it's just opening the door and just saying like, hey, I need some help with this. So I think that's huge. It's just getting kids to this point where they need to be asking for help.
Absolutely. And that falls back on us for modeling that behavior. So, when you're not good at something, try it with your kids to show them, you know what, I'm not good at this. We can ask for help. We can YouTube. It can just end up being a horrible result, and that's okay. Right. But we tried it.
Definitely. I love that. I love it for sure. So another thing that I think would be huge for kids, and we touched upon this, is about integrity. Because for me, shifting from a life of pure 100% integrity from a life of where I just wasn't living a life of integrity. I was, telling white lies. I was just everywhere I could cut corners, I would. And when I made the switch to being like 100% where I don't tell a lie, I don't cheat, I don't steal, I don't do anything that would lack integrity. But you had an interesting point about this, because I said, with my daughter, when she tells a lie, I'm not going to be like, oh, that's so, she's cute, she told a lie, I'm gonna like punish her in some way, shape, or form. But why don't you just say what you said about that?
Oh, I said my view on lying is a little bit different. So in the classroom, anytime someone was lying and cheating, I always found that was the Band-Aid, that was their solution to hide or to fix something else. And whenever I got down to the root of it, it usually ended up being a kid cheated on a test because he was so afraid to fail, so afraid to bring a bad grade home, that they would rather get caught cheating and face consequences than they would just facing a failure.
Yeah.
So we've unloaded so much pressure on these kids that they would just rather cheat.
Right. So for me, it's like maybe it's not about punishing the lie. It's about digging a little bit deeper and being like, why would I feel that my daughter was forced to lie? Like, why does she think that she needs to lie to me? And she's 2.5 months old, so she's not lying yet. But why would I feel that she needs to lie to me? Because she's scared of me? Is it because she's so scared of failure? And like trying to dig into what underlying emotions are there. Is it the need for acceptance? Is it the fear of failure? Or is there something else that's not being uncovered? And that kind of leads me into the next point about allowing our kids to just kind of feel their emotions. A lot of what I have to do in coaching is just take my clients back to all of the things that happened to them in their lives as kids and giving them an outlet to express those emotions, because they were never fully expressed. And when you hold on to emotions and they're not properly dealt with and they're not properly let go of, then those emotions might dictate your whole entire life. And I could give some examples, but I don't think I'm going to go into it here. But like those little instances that happen in your life, and you see them probably in school all the time, when one little thing that a classmate could say to another student could like dramatically change who that student is. So a great little example I have is of my little nephew. He loves avocados, right? So he like always eats avocados. He loves them so much. And then one day when he started going to school, he brought an avocado to school, and one of the kids said, "Oh, what's that? That avocado? That's gross." And then he came home and told my cousin that's like, "Oh, I'm never eating avocados again." And she was luckily like, conscious of it and said, "Well, do you like avocados?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, I like avocados." And she's like, "Well, why are you going to let these other people dictate, what you eat and what you don't?" So, by giving him that outlet to express what he was truly feeling, so that one instance didn't begin to dictate who he was and begin to like shape his personality. Because ultimately, what we want to do is allow our children to stay their true selves. And every single little thing that happens to them, every time they fear failure, every time they get picked on and aren't given an outlet to feel those emotions that they're holding on to, it's going to change who they are a little bit. And what I do in my coaching is get people back to who they truly are and allow them to experience the joy that exists being your true self, kind of thing. So I don't know if I gave you a point to kind of spin off on there, but it started with just allowing kids to have an outlet for their emotions. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. But.
Well, I know that when my son is upset and he comes home, it's always a listening ear. And so we make sure that when our kids are upset, that they can feel like we're listening without judgment. And that's where conflict resolution comes in, is we let our kids express themselves. And in classroom, I give them the option, are you asking me to intervene or find solutions? And then when they do ask for help, I try and give them a couple different routes so that they can pick which route works with who they are, right? So like my husband and I resolve things very differently. I'm going to walk away from the problem, see if it still bothers me. And most of the time I'll be like, you know what? I'll judge this person on their intentions, and their intentions weren't to hurt me. I'm okay with letting it go. My husband won't even stew. He's like, meh, it's my buddy, all done. Like, we're just very different. But giving kids options on how to solve a problem lets them be their authentic selves, but also allows them to learn different problem solving strategies, whether it be socially, academically, emotionally. It doesn't really matter. My husband and I, actually, when my eldest son gets upset now, we used to do timeout or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, do you want to go calm down in your room by yourself, or do you want to go outside and play soccer? And he's like, I'm going to go outside and play soccer for a little bit. And that's how he thinks, that's how he calms down. So now we're giving him different strategies to manage those emotions, as opposed to us just being, you know what, you're screaming, go sit on the stairs.
Yeah, I love that. Giving them different options, different outlets to actually express or, let go of those emotions, for sure. So I love that. Another thing that I think that is a huge, quality to instill in your children is just the sense of gratitude. For me, gratitude was a complete game changer when I started focusing on what I do have in my life and stopped focusing on what I don't have in my life. It just changed everything for me, and I live my life where I'm grateful at all times. But with kids, I think it's a little bit harder to give them to instill that value in them, because they are so kind of like destination driven or reward driven. So I think a lot of what you've already touched on would help correct that. But how do you think we install gratitude in our kids? Like, how do we make our kids grateful?
Well, it's funny. In my classroom, I make a point to do as many nonverbal cues as possible. Okay. But at home, I have much less patience for my own kids than everyone else's children. So one thing that we kind of substituted in our house, my 3-year-old doesn't get it, but my 6-year-old gets it real good, is when somebody gives him something, instead of being, what do you say? What do you say? I try and label the gesture. and the intention. So if someone were to give my son an old t-shirt or whatever it is, and he's like, oh, thanks, I have it, I have this t-shirt, instead of saying, what do you say? I'll be like, wow, that was really nice of them to think of you that you might like this. And then I'll see the wheels turn. He's like, yeah. And then he'll turn around to the other person and say, thank you. So I didn't, what do you say? But just pointing out and labeling different points of gratitude instead of focusing on the object and that, but the intention behind what goes a really long way.
Definitely.
And even it's funny, among my peers, a lot of people always say, oh, your Facebook posts and Instagram posts, your kids are so funny. But what I think is kind of cool is that they don't even realize they're living these moments. They just haven't stopped to put it on paper or stopped to realize that finding a half-eaten breadstick in the couch is funny. Wow, I'm grateful we have food and we have kids and all those things. And even if I do it, I can tell you now, I don't say it out loud enough to my own kids.
Yeah.
So we all have these moments. It's just taking the time to appreciate them. And so when I do those kind of posts online, I'm hoping other people realize, oh, you know what? My kid left a half-eaten pita on the bathroom floor, and see that moment of gratitude instead of just, oh, there's another pita, like I'm cleaning up this mess all the time. I mean, it is frustrating by all means, but practicing what you preach.
Yeah. That was actually a perfect segue into what I was going to say is I think probably as you were talking, because I was thinking, I'm like, how am I going to install gratitude in my daughter's life? And, ultimately the best way I think to do that is to live a life of gratitude yourself, and when, your kids or your students see you living a life where you're grateful for every single little thing, for finding a half-eaten breadstick in the couch, which is a weird thing to be grateful for, but I'll give it to you. But I mean, when your kids see that gratitude and you're just expressing gratitude in every area of your life, it's going to be impossible for them to not pick up on that behavior, So it's not really that you have to make your kid write out gratitude every morning. It's just they have to see you living that life and really truly living it, not just posting on Instagram a gratitude quote, but you don't really live a life of gratitude. A life of gratitude is like, it's just always switched on. That's the way it is for me. It's like, I'm grateful in every single moment of my life. It's actually, I'm so grateful that it's actually kind of annoying how grateful I am. It's like, because it's just constantly playing in my head, just like the gratitude, like even as I talk about gratitude right now, I'm just so grateful right now that we're able to sit here and talk about this and share, a message that I think is going to help so many people. And then it goes even further. I'm grateful that I have this cool little studio, and I'm grateful for Juliana who's videotaping everything. So it's just kind of always on. I mean, I think if us as parents and us as teachers and us as people that are shaping young children learn to live that life of gratitude, it's just naturally going to spill over.
It's funny. It's contagious.
Yeah.
And when you surround yourself with other people who are grateful, then when you kind of like get into a rut and you're forgetting to be appreciative of what's around, all of a sudden, I see a post or a podcast or, see a friend who does the same thing. And then you're like, oh yeah, how did I let this go for so long without getting back on board? So, I mean, when you surround yourself with people, annoying or not, about their gratitude, like it's a great reminder.
Definitely. And, that kind of like this leads me to another thing that I think would be so important for kids to latch onto. And again, they will latch onto this if this is the type of life you live. But it is in giving that we receive. And Tony and I kind of like really dug into this in the last podcast. But when I was able to shift my focus of my life from getting to giving, it's like everything changed for me. And not only did I get 10 times what I gave, but it's just like my life improved in so many areas. Like people, from the life I used to live, I just see the difference in the way people respond to me. And you probably even still feel this a little bit. It's like back in my like partying days and when I was so like egocentric, I was just so focused on myself. It like people saw that, it was easy to see that I was a selfish person. But when I made this shift and not doing it purposely, but I just wanted to be a better person, I wanted to live a life of integrity. I wanted to stop taking so much and start giving more. It just like changed my relationships with everyone without even a word being said. It was like an energetic thing. It just changed. You and I 10 years ago would not be sitting here doing this, with the person I was, right? So it's like it just changed everything. So I think if we could teach our kids the power that exists with giving. And I don't even know any real practical examples. Obviously, the only thing that I could think of is that just to live that life and let my kid absorb it. But I'm sure there's other practical things that we could do to teach our kids to be more giving.
Absolutely. And giving, we always associate monetary values to it, but giving can be your time, your energy, your emotion, personal relationship. And so I give a lot in my classroom, but that's also why I yield really good results. Right. I've gotten kids where, a resource teacher's like, he was supposed to be a behavior problem and he's not in your classroom, but it just took giving him attention.
Yeah.
Or it just took giving him, sometimes it's responsibility. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just giving them my confidence. Like, oh, no, I know you're going to do this because you're capable. And they're like, oh, well, if you think I'm capable, I must be capable. But at the end of the day, it always comes back to those relationships.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that it comes to that a lot of people are missing in this world is just compassion. It's again, stepping away from that dualistic world and moving into non-duality and being like, we're all connected here. And then when you realize that we're all connected and we're all one, we're all the same at some level, you just have compassion for everybody. And that compassion, it doesn't go unrecognized. And like you see it with your students, explain your compassion. Well, they need more attention. They need to do this. But all that really is just compassion. You're compassionate about that student. You're compassionate about all of your students. And the results are like speaking for themselves. So just someone that actually is in a place of like non-judgment, just pure love, pure compassion. When you go into that classroom, I know 100%, I don't even have to ask you this, that you just want the best for those students, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, you'll see so many people, it's so easy to criticize society and all its problems. And, they're like, oh, they lack empathy. They lack empathy. And we always teach empathy, but no one ever teaches the positive side of empathy. So when you hear empathy, you're thinking like, oh, I understand you're frustrated. I understand you're sad. But no one ever talks about, I understand your excitement and now I'm excited too. I understand you're happy. Now I'm happy for you too. Right. And I think when you talk about entitlement and trying to fix those kind of problems, well, teach your kids to be excited, like a happy empathy for other people so that they can appreciate what's in their lives as well as other people's and feed off that energy and then strive for that for themselves. We always focus on that negative side, and I always, in my classroom, feel like that positive energy is just missing.
I love that. I love that this came up because I haven't even talked about this on Rise Up Rich yet, but a big thing that I observe is that people are scared to like applaud other people's achievements. And the reason being is that they want to be better than that person, right? Deep down, when I really started digging deep, like going real to deep, dark corners, I had to ask myself, like, what is the reason I want success? Because when I was trying to let go of my desire for money, and the answer that I came up with is because I want to show everyone that I made it. And I was like, what the hell's up with that? And then I was like, so it's like it was like this competition thing. It's like, then I asked myself, who am I in competition with? And I said, everybody. Like I was just being really real with myself. And then I came to this awareness after I went through this process and I let go of my desire for money. And I came to this awareness that this is how everybody feels. People aren't patting other people on the back when they achieve something because secretly they feel shitty about themselves that they weren't able to achieve that at the same rate as, like, if someone else, let's say someone else is 40 and they've made millions of dollars, what I used to say, I would be like, man, like, why am I not there yet? Right. And it's just like this constant comparison. And that might relate into what we're talking about with the fear of judgment, of this constant comparison. So we need to dig into why we're constantly comparing ourselves to every other person. And one of the ways to overcome that is to start seeing the joy in other people's accomplishments. And man, if our kids could learn this one simple thing, because what happens is when you start seeing the joy in other people's accomplishments, the accomplishments that you are seeking will begin to flow into your life. It's crazy. So here's another example. When I would read like an amazing business book, back when I was reading all these business books, or listen to an amazing business podcast, or follow like a really cool guy on Instagram that I'm like, this guy like knows his shit, I would not share it with other people because I'm like, I want to keep this information to myself. And I see that with Rise Up Rich because I can see the insights on my Instagram, and I see that no one is hitting that little send button. And the reason being is because they're in competition with everybody. They secretly or deep down emotionally want to be better than their peers.
Absolutely. I see it in the classroom all the time. And I keep telling the children, I'm like, you don't compete with your peers, compete with yourself. There's a spot for competition. It's just not with people who can help you, because then they're not going to help you. And the analogy I use, which I learned thanks to Tony's gym, was that I tell the kids, I'm like, I go to the gym. I'm not even 5'5", and if I'm on the rower next to a 6-foot police officer, I will never row as fast as him. That doesn't mean I can't try and beat my personal best every time. And even if I could row that fast, when I get there, I hit the destination, there's nothing left for me. But if I'm always in competition with myself, I can always do better. There's no final destination. It's just a road that you just keep traveling on and keep getting better and keep finding that next step. And so how that translates into the classroom is just learn the love of learning. Don't worry about the grades. Don't compete with your peers within the classroom. Compete with yourself. And when your peer does it better than you, ask them what they do differently and learn new strategies and build up your own portfolio so that you can outdo yourself each time instead of trying to get someone else down.
Definitely. Like, I mean, I just love that. I think another way that you could just teach it is through experientially is just having kids pat each other on the back when they do good. Like, like if someone gets like an A+ on a test or whatever, I know you wouldn't want to do that, but whatever. If someone does something amazing, like get the rest of the students to like congratulate them and be like, I'm so happy for you that you were able to achieve that and really truly feel it. And here's the one thing I do know about spiritual growth is like you can almost trick yourself. Like that's what I did with gratitude. I wrote out gratitude every single day. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for this. And yeah, I was grateful, but at the same time, I was still saying like, why don't I have like $1 million in the bank? I was still feeling that. But then all of a sudden, one day, it just turned on, and like I had basically, I didn't know if I tricked myself, but like it just happened. And I think the same thing could happen with sharing in other people's accomplishments instead of being like that competition. Like if someone does something amazing, instead of being like, oh, I wish I could have done that, just go up to that person and pat them on the back and be like, amazing job. Because I know from experience that if you start to do that, not only are people just going to take to you so much more, they're just going to want to be around you, but also that person that you say, hey, amazing job, they're going to say, hey, can I help you? Like, do you need help figuring out how to do this? Because I want to help you do it, right? And it's like, it gets it out of this competition mentality, and I guess I'm kind of being contradictory here because we're talking in some ways that competition is a good thing of like not having rewards for like 8th place and things like that. But I guess that's about failure. Like failure is a good thing. Showing people like, hey, it's okay to fail. Like there's fuel in failure. It means that you can improve. It means that you can learn from the process. So I guess it's like kind of a little bit of a contradiction about competition, but it's about when you do get that 8th place, going up to the guy that got 1st place and be like, hey man, great job.
Absolutely. And it's learning where the competition is. Organized sports, absolutely. Get competitive, do whatever. But when it comes time to personal growth, that's not where it is.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you're competing with yourself to be better.
Exactly.
And like, you always talk about how when you stopped looking for certain things, whether it was money or whatever it was in your life, that it just kind of started coming to you. I see proof of that in the classroom all the time. When kids stop obsessing about a grade at the end of the road, they just do better because they're having fun with the process. And then those grades just come without them even understanding why they got a better grade until they reflect on it and go, oh, but I had so much fun doing it. It wasn't work anymore.
Yeah, I love it. That's amazing. The last thing that I think that we should touch upon is, and for me it was a huge thing, was stop passing the blame. And you see this a lot now of like, I guess this parent's kind of taking the side of the kid. The kid comes home from school and it's like, this teacher won't allow me to do this and this, and then the parent goes and yells at the teacher or does whatever. And for me, when my daughter comes home and says that, the answer I'm going to have is, well, what was your role in not getting this grade, or what was your role in getting in trouble and being sent to the principal's office? Like, where are you taking full responsibility? And I think just there's just not enough people taking responsibility. I mean, you just see it in like the lawsuits and stuff like that. It's like, people slipping and falling. It's like no one's taking responsibility for their own actions. And learning to take responsibility for my own actions was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, because it made me realize that nothing outside of myself had control over me. Before, if I was blaming my teacher because I got a bad grade, it was like, well, my teacher was in control of my grade. But when I stopped putting that blame on my teacher, it was only me that was in control of that grade. And I think that would be like a huge tool for kids to like grasp.
It would be astounding to see the next generation change that dialogue and see, teachers and parents all as one big team, instead of trying to pass the blame.
Yes.
Like we talked about entitlement and everyone gets a reward, right? Like we made it impossible to fail. So as parents, we're so afraid of failure. We don't want our kids to fail, right? So then we start doing stuff. And then all of a sudden we had helicopter parents. And then we had lawnmower parents. And then we had bulldozer, snow plow, something or other parents, right? We just kept removing obstacles and all that stuff because we didn't want our kids to have experienced failure. Mm-hmm. So now everyone gets a trophy. You can't fail. Everyone gets a trophy. We're all good. We solved that problem, right? Or when you do fail, you know what, but I'll give you a reward so it just doesn't hurt quite as much, right? And so we need to take away the external rewards and the external motivation, get back into that internal motivation. So we... when you do that and you let the kids just kind of reflect on whether they failed, what went right, what went wrong, just ask your kids, like, what would you do differently next time to solve this problem? Then all of a sudden you get rid of all of that. You start putting the responsibility back on the kids. Like, well, what would you do different the next time around? Like, what is your plan so that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, teaching your kids to take responsibility, there's no wrong in it. But you know what's going to be interesting is, because I loved how you went through all those like types of parents. It's going to be interesting. Like I like to see where this style of new parenting that we're talking about here in this podcast, of what kind of kids it's going to create. I think it's going to create like amazing kids that are compassionate and they're full of gratitude and they're helping each other and they're patting each other on the back and that are taking full responsibility for all our actions. That's what I hope that comes, but you never know. Like, everyone always thinks they have it right. So what we'll have to do 20 years from now, we'll have to come back and do the podcast again, and then we'll be like, oh, we were wrong about that. We were right about that. But one thing that I think that's amazing that's happening, it's because of teachers like you and parents like you, and just even like just the expansion of awareness around how our parenting methods affect our children. That was a great example when you went through all of these types of parenting methods. Back then, though, that was all unconscious. You know what I mean? Like, we gave 8th place trophies unconsciously because we didn't want our kids to feel bad, but it wasn't like we had this conscious thought process of how this is going to affect our children in the future. But now every single thing that that you're trying to install in the classroom and that both of us are going to try and install as parents is about that, asking that question is like, how is this going to make my child a better person? How is this going to prepare them for the future? So I think that's the most important question that we can ask as parents and as teachers, for sure. Yeah, and not taking on our kids' responsibility that they're fully capable of handling themselves. So like a good example, a very simple example of that was I happened to work where my kids go to school. And within the second week of school, I walked by the Lost and Found and see my kids' $50 brand new sneakers in the Lost and Found. And it killed me to keep on walking. But his shoes are not my responsibility. And if I put them back in his locker, he'll never know he lost them in the first place. Yeah. But to panic at school and realize he didn't have his shoes, and the humbling experience of going to tell his teacher, I don't have my shoes, I don't know where they went. And then hearing her say, well, you didn't put them away and they got swept and lost and found. They've not been there in 6 weeks. Yeah. Had I put the shoes back in his locker, he would have had no understanding of his responsibility to put them away and the consequences when he doesn't fulfill that responsibility. Definitely. Super simple example, but the learning opportunity was immense. Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? There's so many tools and resources out there now, and because of this expansion of consciousness that's happening in all around the world, and you know, right now we're probably like 10 years ahead of what's actually happening with the ideas that we're talking about right here. But in 10 years' time, everyone is going to be talking about integrity and gratitude and taking full responsibility. So the thing is that because of this expansion of consciousness, it's just like it's going to be so amazing to see what type of children this type of thinking produces. You know, like I'm super excited almost as an experiment to see how my daughter is going to grow as a person. Like I have like this constant like kind of, I'm actually going to like write a story about it. It's like, I'm like, I wonder, you know, will you be compassionate? Like, I wonder, like, will you love animals? And like this constant, like, this question what I'm basically asking is, you know, will you have the same beliefs and the same values that I hold so near and dear to my heart? And I believe that she will just because of osmosis. So ultimately, you know, where we'll kind of wrap this thing up is I think, you know, the best way to help your children is to help yourself. And if you can start to live a life where you applaud other people's achievements, where you take full responsibility for all actions, where you're grateful every single day, where you learn to love the process and not just the destination, your kids can't help but get it. They're just going to get it by osmosis, you know? And then the last thing I think that you touched upon is just like compassion. You know, it's just, you got to have compassion for every single person in this world. And when you can get to that place where you feel the compassion, and when you're in that classroom, I know that you feel this, it's like there is no judgment of any child in that classroom. It's just pure compassion. And imagine if our whole entire world was like that, and every teacher felt that. They weren't just there for the paycheck. They were there to really have compassion no matter how difficult the child was. Just have compassion and love and just pour everything they had into them. Like how amazing this world will become.
Absolutely. My husband teases me all the time. He's like, oh, my favorite student. He's like, babe, like you've got like 50 favorite students. But really, I enjoy what I do.
Yeah. Awesome. Julie, I think like you delivered a ton of value. I think that this is a conversation that needs to be had way more often, you know. I think we touched upon some like super, super crucial points. So thanks for coming on the podcast, and I look forward to having you back in 20 years.
Thanks.